Greetings. Both mildew animalibus and macrobacteria are small enough that other organisms will inevitably swallow them, even if by accident, and let me tell you, it's not just by accident. And the worst part is, they can't swim away being plankton. For instance, octodentes or dentes incisuras, and if they evolve mechanisms to survive the digestive process, particularly the stomach. In the case of macrobacteria, some forms have shells tough enough that they can survive, and mildew animalibus may do it by containing alkalis in their skin cells that counteract the acid of the stomach. They'll find themselves in the bigger animal's gut, an environment where defenseless, very easily digestible food flows through constantly with warm temperatures and no predators, evolution's definition of paradise. So obviously they will specialize to live here. And given they've evolved not to die here, all they need to do is find a way to stay in the gut, which may come in the form of barbs on the macrobacteria, and the kite developing to hold/stick to the lining of the gut using their arms to filter feed from the bigger animal's gut in the case of mildew animalibus. Most animals that adapt to this niche severely simplify or lose most of their body systems. Of course, both these macrobacteria and mildew animalibus are already very simple, lacking sexual fucking reproduction, pun completely intended. They will also lose all senses besides keeping track of how much food they've consumed and making sure they're still attached to the lining of the gut, as that's all they have to care about. This applies to both clades. And this relationship provides no benefit to the bigger animal. In fact, it's taking food right out of its gut. Doing stuff like this is called parasitism. The specific variant shown here, where they live in their guts, is called endoparasitism, and bringing this back to those macrobacteria, they have become flatworms. However, they need to have their shell as larvae in order to survive the host's stomach, and so developing the shell will take a little while before they're released from the parent, and once they're in the new host's gut, they'll lose their shell and elongate as they become adults. I'll call this clade Ventrum creatura, or gut creature, as opposed to Aqua creatura, or water creature. So here's a short, very rough, present-centric breakdown of Planet Emigen's natural history, with no spoilers for future videos, of course. There's the time before Fronten Achtergum Animalibus, and after that was the first great wave of diversification, which roughly aligns with most of part 2, and now we're at the second great wave of diversification, which roughly aligns with part 3. During this time, Natare Animalibus was the most diverse clade of radial zoans, if you exclude what's its name. I seriously don't care about those parasites from last episode enough, and actually spite them enough that I refuse to bother to look up their name. You know what I'm talking about, hopefully. I don't care. And while most of that can be accredited to octodentes, dentes incisuras wasn't failing to pull its weight either, and that is the long-winded way I'm explaining that dentes incisuras is the topic of this video, in spite of the fact you could see it in the title. Okay, so parasites. I already described the endoparasites, but that is not the only kind of parasitism, and some dentes incisuras may engage in foracy, which is when a smaller animal takes a ride on a bigger animal to get further faster than it otherwise could. This frequently happens to manta rays. And going back to Emigen, the tooth arrangement of dentes incisuras is perfect for latching on to bigger animals, although their sharp teeth may leave a scar on other individuals will then latch onto the same spot. Because the scar stands out over multiple bitings, blood may begin to leak right into the forsyte's digestive tract, and so it would be beneficial to develop the ability to digest this highly nutritious substance. This is called hematophagy, and once this ability is evolved, they may begin actively seeking out blood, so they will hold onto their hosts for longer, and to do this, they may develop the ability to inject anticoagulants to prevent the blood from clotting on them. And they may develop bigger clutching teeth to more easily access the hemocoel. This is ectoparasitism, and it has a similar diversity factor to endoparasitism. I'll call this clade Ferum insanguinea dentes, or blood blade teeth, as opposed to Piente leminius, or plant blades. And now we're done with parasites for this part. In the last part, I mentioned that octodentes preys upon dentes incisuras. To escape these predators, they may start using anguilliform locomotion and undergo the adaptations linked to anguilliform locomotion, but of course with their form of radial symmetry taken into account. For instance, anguilliform involves turning side to side to propel themselves forward, which means becoming flat. However, organisms on M again can't just copy this due to their radial symmetry, so the solution they come to is to have two sets of sides. Although this does cut back on efficiency, it's the best they can do. If it's hard to envision, just imagine two wheels clipping through each other with one at a 90-degree different angle to the other. And with all that said and done, you may notice that this drawing looks a lot like a rocket, although it actually looks more like an arrow in 3D. Either way, this is no coincidence, as all three are dealing with roughly the same rules of aero, or in this case, hydrodynamics, although these aliens are underwater on a planet with less gravity than that of our own, but still similar. I'll call this clade Primum Corpus Nandi, or the first body swimmers, as opposed to Basic Harai Nata, or basic swimmers. There's a concept in Spec Bio where your organism has a gas-filled bladder it uses to float. In Spec Bio, such organisms are called ballots, and generally speaking they're considered pretty absurd, and on land they are, but in the water, however, it's evolved multiple times here on Earth, more obviously in cephalopods, and also in the line that led to us, the fish. I will also note that when we came onto land, we began using our swim bladder to breathe, and given terrestrial organisms normally evolve lungs from their existing gills, this is evidence that it's pretty darn unlikely this would work on land, although maybe on a low-gravity planet, but again, harkening back to part 1, the minimum is 80% Earth, so yeah. Anyway, some octodentes may evolve an air bladder, and they may fill it with gas in the same way as cephalopods to make themselves float. See this PBS Eons video if you want to know more about this method. But anyway, the relevant implications of this method are that they'll have to have already evolved a closed circulatory system, and so they have that, but yeah. Anyway, with that, I'll call this clade. And further, some forms may retain the body shape of other octodentes, only using their air bladder to help with buoyancy, but others may begin relying on their air bladder for swimming, which may bring about drastic changes to their body plan. They may evolve a funnel to pump air for propulsion, like a jetpack. As the air sacs are on the front of the body, the funnels will be on the face. To make room, the teeth may shrink. This will mean that they can't bite into other animals as easily, so they may compensate for this in two ways. One is with a more generalist diet, and the second is turning the limbs on the first two segments into tentacles and bringing them to the front of the body. And their teeth will turn into claws on the tentacles, greatly expanding in number to cover the whole limb and coming together to oppose each other so the animal can grab things, allowing them to become deeper in their generalist lifestyle. Anyway, the first two segments may tagmose, and the other limbs will atrophy to reduce drag, and their other segments will also tagmose. And now we have two tagmas, a cephalon, which is dedicated to feeding and propulsion as well as perception, and an abdomen, which serves the roles of turning, containing most internal organs, and giving the body a more hydrodynamically optimal shape, i.e. one that gets thinner towards the front end? We'll go with that. And also, the gills may internalize, and small holes may develop on the front as they blast forward. Water will fall in through these holes, giving them more oxygen than if they just had open gills sitting there. And to more easily eat while moving, they may flip their digestive system so that their mouth is at what previously was the end of the body, and teeth may develop in this new mouth and develop into a big, flat, molar-like form. Also, these forms only have 4 teeth in spite of the phylum's name. And the anus will also be atrophied, and stuff will come out of the funnel instead, and they may also duplicate their eyes onto their front to see what's in front of them better, and with that, I'll call this clade Intus sunt piscis, or inside-out fish, as opposed to normalis piscis, or normal fish. As was referenced previously, Teram errant vermes digs through the ground, eating landed marine snow. As time goes on, some forms might evolve to dig through substances besides sand and dirt, like piles of pebbles on the sea floor. But just doing that would scratch up their skins, so to mitigate this, they may evolve chitinous scales to take the damage for them, and these scales will be replaced regularly since they also get damaged, similar to early ecdysozoans. I'll call this clade Scaly vermes, or scale worms, as opposed to Mollis vermibus, or soft worms. Okay, post-production lucky otter here. Something I forgot to mention is that they also have special front guts that can be with scales in it that can be overted out to pull the sediment around them apart, to pull apart tougher sediments. I added this in much later when I wrote this, and I forgot to write it in before I actually voiced it over, and I'm just realizing this now. Oops. Now you have it. Other forms may begin living on top of the sediments. They may develop long, needle-like, but ultimately soft limbs. Of course, since they are radially symmetrical, they will have 4 legs on all 4 sides of a segment. And they may regularly roll over every so many hours to give their revolutionized limbs a break. These limbs may also be able to pick up on sounds, and they may prey on celipides living at the bottom of the sea. These forms also serve as an example of tagmosis, as the first 2 segments form a single head for feeding and sensory functions. The first segment's limbs may develop hard ends, which may develop into hard pinching claws used to catch prey, and the second segment's limbs may evolve into eye stalks. Hi, post-production me again. I will point out that this clade has also turned their weird limb proboscis throat thing into a gizzard now. I'll call this clade tentacle vermes, or tentacle worms, as opposed to informis vermes, or limbless worms, Peribus vermibus, or legless worms. So, all existing octodentes use limb-driven swimming. This has served them well thus far, however it is not the only way of swimming. And in fact, in a simple open area such as the pelagic zone, it's actually very inefficient, so they will pretty much inevitably look into alternative methods of swimming, which should most likely lead to body-driven swimming, which will start out as repeatedly turning left and right to generate momentum. This is called anguilliform locomotion. They may lose all limbs except for the ones at the back, and the overall body may develop a thin and flat, broad shape. As mentioned a moment ago, the final segment Weltagma, the limbs are retained. However, both limbs on each side may fuse into one, individually forming a structure similar to the bottom edges of a spacecraft. And the final segment at large is similar to the tail of an arrow. These animals do use anguilliform locomotion, even if their swimming does look much more complex than that of eels on Earth, due to their radial symmetry. I'll call this clade Russus piscis, or turnfish, as opposed to Pina nandi, or fin swimmers. And to intensify the amount of force applied to the water, they may develop hardened structures inside the body. A good candidate for this is their teeth, so they may develop extra teeth inside their segments to increase rigidity, and to avoid hurting the organism, they will lose their sharpness. I will call these structures ossicles. And due to their existing arrangements, they will appear in an octagonal constellation around the digestive tract. I'll call these structures ossicle systems, and there will be 1 per segment. And the ossicles under the fins are used as muscle attachments for the limbs and the segments that retain them. I'll call this subphylum Danes ossa, or tooth bones, as opposed to Mollis piscis, or soft fish. And some species may further increase the force of their turns by fusing all the ossicles in their last segment into one structure, encasing the digestive tract and nerve cords, which I'll call a superossicle. I'll call this clade Magnossa, or big bones, as opposed to Basicassa, or basic bones. And a quickly evolving subclade of these may evolve a superossicle in the head to protect the brain. However, the first segment has no ossicles if the teeth are not counted, so the first and second segments may tagmose, forming a single skull ossicle. And having such a long, rigid object in their front may make it hard for them to turn side to side in this area of the body, which may serve as an impetus for the development of subcorrangiform locomotion. in which only the last two-thirds of their body are used for propulsion. And the front may evolve a more ovular shape as not to be pushed to the side when force from the latter end of the body and colliding with the water combine. And in the back of the body, adaptations to propulsion are intensified for obvious reasons. And to maintain stability and roll, pitch, and turn, the first segment may redevelop fins. And with that, I'll call this clade Cranium Piscis or skullfish as opposed to Petit Piscis or buttfish. In defense against Tentacal vermibus, Suctus pides may develop a hard, rigid shell which will encompass the main body as well as the limbs attaching to the ground. There may also be special pockets to retract their feeding arms into if threatened. I'll call this clade Testa Siderum or shield stars as opposed to Intermes Astra or defenseless stars. Similar to Suctus pides, some Ilversostella may evolve to protect themselves from Tentacal vermibus. Okay, quick interlude. Basically, the audio qualities from here on out is going to sound worse and it's going to be more bumbly, like when I'm talking casually, basically, because I'm no longer working on a script, off of a script, I'm just working off of bullet points, because that'll allow me to get the episode out quicker, and I want to be out of in 2021, and the start of 2022 is within the next 24 hours, so I'm kind of in a hurry. I've got to make the assets, I've got to do the editing, and I've got to do, like, half the voiceover still. So, yeah. Okay, I want to preface this next bit with two things. First of all, this clade was created in April of 2020, so I don't think there's another project where this trait is also applied. I just wanted to be known that I didn't know about that project at the time. I'm pretty sure it hadn't come out yet, like in any form, or even for over a year after that, I believe. So first, I want to clarify that, and second of all, this is a very unlikely adaptation, but the reason I like doing speculative biology is to explore weird, not necessarily weird, but unless they're unlikely, but quite possibly weird adaptations that could happen in an alternate universe or an alternate world, in a different world of any kind, actually. And just explore how they could work out. Basically it's to have clades do what I call doing something interesting. I'll explain that in a future video, probably by the end of 2022 or at least by June 2023, probably. Yes, I plan very long term in the future, it's silly. But yeah, this clade has an adaptation that's very unlikely, so yeah. But I still want to explore what it might look like. Anyway, as I was saying, they may evolve a means of defense. And they could evolve a shell, however, a shell might well sink into the sand at the bottom of the sea, hindering their mobility, by preventing them from moving, because they're entrenched, they're like in a socket in the ground. I'm buying time to think, yes I am. But they may turn their bottom limbs into onto a set of proper legs they can walk around on, and get rid of the sub-limbs on the bottom, because they are vestigial. And to literally see what they are doing, they may evolve eyes. These may first be under the arms to see in a circle around them, but they then may also evolve ones on the ends of the arms, which is what I'm now calling the top limbs in this clade, so that they can move them around more easily. To see what's anything that might come to attack the genitalia, they also may evolve a ring of eyes around that, as well as a ring of eyes around the bottom of the mouth at the bottom of the body, to see what they're eating, even though they'll probably have very little light down there, given this is the deep sea and this is underneath the body, but still, they might still have it. And to hear sounds, they may turn the little filter feedy bits on the ends of their arms into setae to pick up sounds, as well as they may also, so they have these in their arms now, and they may also evolve very small little setae which go all around the body as a sense of touch, and I'm assuming they probably already had a sense of taste in their mouth. However, when turning their filter feeding bits on the ends of their arms into setae will stop them from filter feeding, forcing them to adopt a purely detritivorous niche. So to dig around more easily, they may turn the ends of their bottom limbs into long, flat, spade-like endings in order to dig around in the sand. And also conveniently for them, their already pre-existing body is already very crust-thinized. meaning that they're already adapted to this lifestyle. However, with this very active lifestyle they now have, and also how many organs are stuffed everywhere in their body because of how much space their stomach takes up in the center, and the fact that they have to be duplicated around or be a ring, an open circulatory system is just not viable, meaning they were forced to adopt a closed circulatory system with a heart either above or below the brain, which is above the stomach. I really don't know if it's above or below the brain, just they're both directly above the stomach. So, yeah. And having this closed circulatory system will have the double benefits that basically, when they're in their tunnel, it'll mean they can more easily support themselves through hydraulic pressure, meaning that their tunnels are less likely to collapse directly onto them. So it has that benefit too. And after all that, I'll call this clade Stella Qui Fugit, or the star that runs, as opposed to Tardum Cetus, or the slow star. Also, completely post-production, Lucky Otter here, I forgot to mention that they also have setae around the eyes below the arms. Seriously, this is post-outro. This is the last thing I'm doing for the series in 2021 besides the actual effort of actually uploading the video. So this was the end of the PEN Part 3 season episode. There's not a lot to talk about compared to last time. There wasn't any big head hassle in producing the season episode. I did it in the last 10 minutes. I just took all the pen episodes from PEN Part 3, put them into a single file in iMovie. Then I just removed the intros and outros, and here it is, done. There really wasn't a lot of drama like last time. And I don't have any real new news to mention. It's been less than a week since I premiered the Part 2 season episode, and in terms of I guess I could talk about the overall production of Part 3. It's just one small problem. I finished production on PEN Part 3, let me check, 365 days ago, 16 hours and 26 minutes ago, 29 minutes ago, 31 minutes ago, somewhere in that range. So, yeah, I kinda, forgive me for not remembering, okay? So, yeah, that's a thing. Hey.